Hello and welcome to this presentation by Gisa Beacon, Lori Benoit, Anidra Rochelle Marshall, and Sonora Mosby. This presentation partially fulfills the requirements of Curriculum 7014, Decision Making for School Improvement, taught by Dr. Amy L. Weems for the Doctoral Program of Curriculum and Instruction at the University of Louisiana at Monroe in the second spring session of 2021. We hope that our principal leadership and data-based school improvement presentation will enhance and clarify your understanding. In this presentation, we will define data-informed educational leadership. We will present conceptual frameworks of data-informed leadership, discuss possible considerations and issues, look at implications of the topic for practices and policies, and offer an opportunity to self-assess. Educational leaders operate in an increasingly data-rich environment where they are expected to make decisions that require sophisticated knowledge, skills, and practices with the use of data. Routinely, today's educational leaders grapple with what it means to draw data into decision-making processes in ways that are more systematic, relevant, and sufficiently nuanced to carry the weight of important decisions. And that is what we hope to explore in this presentation. When defining data-informed educational leadership, educational leaders must lay out what to treat as data and identify what kinds of data might be regularly available to school leaders in the course of their work. Educational leaders should distinguish data-informed educational leadership from the more common conceptions of data-driven leadership and data-based decision-making. It is imperative that educational leaders locate data-informed educational leadership in the decision-making infrastructure that districts and schools create. According to Copland, Knapp, and Swinnerton, data-informed educational leadership should reflect data collection and use that plays out in intentional efforts to improve teaching and learning. The focus should particularly be on how these ideas play out in the work of school and district leadership, where data practices are embedded most directly in ongoing efforts to improve teaching and learning in schools. In this context, deep data analysis that focused on student learning becomes increasingly a routine means for informing teachers and administrators' daily work. This focus on student learning provides to the growing attention to questions of what counts as data. What counts as data? The implication of data is arguably the central function of educational leaders, to guide, direct, assess, and support teaching and learning. Accordingly, for purposes of principal leadership and data-based school improvement, authors concentrated on data as information that data can be used to represent the content or conduct of instruction or its effects on student learning and the student experience, as well as the factors and conditions that most immediately affect these matters. Data is, or could be, used in leadership actions aimed directly at the improvement of instruction, learning, and the student experience, or the organizational conditions that support instructional improvement. To explore what the concept of data-informed leadership might entail, we need first to clarify what we mean by data and for what purpose leaders might be using them. Copland, Knapp, and Swinnerton also indicated that a wide range of data, both quantitative and qualitative, falls within this boundary. While leaders and their audiences may often use data that can be quantified or averaged, such as grades, graduation rates, teachers' experience levels or qualifications, and scores on state assessments, there is clear evidence that many forms of qualitative evidence, capturing the qualities of student work, teachers' perceptions of various features of classroom-based assessments, have as important a role in improving teaching and learning as their quantitative counterparts. As the boundary definition makes clear, leaders are particularly interested in data that pertain most directly to the improvement of teaching and learning. Copland, Knapp, and Swinnerton pointed out that in the current context of accountability and school reform, data-driven decision-making is increasingly seen as an essential part of the educator-leader's repertoire. Yet more is at stake, and more is possible than this term, or even the term data-based decision-making, may imply. Leaders' productive work with data implies more than laying out test scores. noting areas of weakness, and mounting remedies that address patterns in the data. The author suggests that the scope of such work is better described as data-informed educational leadership, a term that broadens the scope of thinking and action in two productive ways. This scope further involves the following in defining data-informed educational leadership. So what is data-informed leadership? First, a shift to data-informed leadership escapes the sometimes deterministic implication of data driving action. Tempting though it may be to imagine educational leaders' actions single-mindedly driven by bottom-line numbers, complex educational problems require greater depth of understanding. While they can be fully knowledgeable of available data when taking action, wise leaders also bring to their work core values and insights into those aspects of practice for which there is not yet good data and may never be. Wise, from 1995, as cited by Kowalski lastly, reminds us that no matter how systematic and comprehensive the data gathering, several other factors are always likely to influence decision making, including interests, ideologies, and institutional context. Second, the concept presumes that data are useful for more in the practice of leadership than the making of decisions per se. Given the inherent ambiguity and multiple meanings of much data in educational settings, data may prompt questions and deliberation more than they point to specific options. Finally, we suggest leaders' expertise with data, what may be referred to as their data literacy, defines how much and what they are able to do with data. The challenge is more than a technical one, limited to the assembling and manipulation of information, but rather extends to what Fullen calls knowledge building, the capacity to extract and share useful meaning from organizational experience. So how do educational leaders use data? Data can serve a range of purposes in the leader's toolkit, as suggested in the table. Each implies different ways of representing what the data say and communicating them to the intended audiences. As the table entries suggest, not all of these leadership actions imply specific decisions, but rather imply a range of actions, including the investigation of new questions. Such public availability of data has multiple implications for leaders, as they interact with those both internal and external to their schools and districts. Among them, the continuing questions about the effectiveness of their ongoing efforts to improve teaching and learning. Finally, Copeland, Knapp, and Swinnerton indicated that data-informed leadership for school improvement assumes an infrastructure that supports and cultivates this kind of activity. So how can districts support data-informed leadership? By offering sources of data or help with assembling or interpreting data, which may involve responding to school needs for particular kinds of information. Embedding new technologies that assist with data collection and interpretation, such as computer-based attendance, discipline records, or grading systems that enable access and make analysis more efficient. And creating occasions for inquiry, as when an influx of new immigrant children raises questions about appropriate educational programs or school assignments. A number of larger system dimensions bear on questions of infrastructure, but given the focus on school and district leaders, the role of the school district is particularly important. District considerations of infrastructure that support data-informed leadership include the following ways of support. How can districts support data-informed leadership? By setting expectations for reliance on data in school planning and decision-making, such as in mandates for the inclusion of certain kinds of evidence in the school improvement plan. Creating accountability structures for data-informed leadership linked to overarching district initiatives, such as expectations for principals to engage in learning walks in classrooms to observe in particular content areas that are the focus of school curriculum. We will now take a look at how an implementation of data-informed leadership can be supported by systems and frameworks. Copland, Knapp, and Swinnerton pointed out that data are only useful to the extent that leaders and those who work with them ask questions that can be answered with the data. Part of this is to have a systematic approach to gather, sort, and evaluate the data. Let's now examine the conceptual frameworks. Data-informed leadership is strongly influenced by the leader's individual values and convictions, as well as the available data. These factors are driving factors in creating action plans. It is essential that there is a systematic approach to evaluate information and a willingness to reframe questions to come to the best possible action plans. Such endeavors are most successful when there is a culture of data-informed decision-making. Organizational cultures are foundational to the use of data. Cultures cannot change from one day to the next. They need to be fostered and strengthened to incorporate data as a central figure for looking at issues. A culture of inquiry needs to build. The leaders are part of this community and must have a willingness to open and sometimes to change their understandings of challenges and issues as well. Cultures are strongest if many participants of the community play an active and supportive role to positively influence the dynamics. While the leaders may proceed with the final decision-making informed by the data gathering and evaluation process is best supported within a culture of inquiry. Organizational cultures contain data as a central feature to look at issues, building a culture that supports inquiry, leaders as learners, many participants of the community, which are part of the culture of inquiry, building a professional community of practice, and of course the leader has the final decision of action, but the leader always includes the voices of those in the community. Within a culture of inquiry, there needs to be a systematic way of looking at and evaluating data. While the structural approach might look clearly organized on paper, the process itself can get messy. Therefore, clear steps are ever more important to give the evaluation relevance. With experience, such processing is getting easier to manage. In the following slides, we will walk you through a cycle of inquiry as shared by Copland, Knapp, and Swinnerton in the Handbook of Database Decision-Making in Education. It's important that we note that there is a systematic way to look at the data, that it is logical, rational, and orderly. However, there can occasionally be some messy application. Participants have a clear role, and experience can influence the inquiry process strongly. The engagement in a circle of inquiry is most successful within a culture of mutual support of such endeavors. The process itself helps to build a culture of inquiry, and the culture helps the process. The circle starts with focusing and reframing problems for inquiry. Residents need to be willing to open and possibly change their way of framing an issue. This could entail continuous search for data that has relevance in looking at the problem at hand with different eyes. Leaders and their teams are accessing or searching for data and evidence. That might mean using tools and strategies and acquiring new tools and strategies to look for additional data. The next step is intentionally inviting alternative or contrary perspectives. Leaders must be open to critique, open to alternative perspectives. These viewpoints will enhance their overall understanding. Understanding the data is essential to plan implementations and action. This sense-making is not always an easy task. Identical data might be read differently depending on the person. So making collective sense of data and its action implications is the next step. In the next step, the leader takes action and communicates the meaning of the data. So this taking action and communicating steps can happen in different arenas of data use, but it is a critical step in the process. Actions taken should be evaluated, and the new feedback and data should inform future actions. This also means that the cycle may start all over again with reframing challenges due to new insights. As mentioned earlier, this process is not necessarily clean and linear. In fact, it's often called messy. However, the structured approach helps to focus on the question in a systematic way and to gain as much clarity as possible. At the heart of implementing systematic approaches and conceptual frameworks to strengthen data-informed educational leadership is the goal to better a school's educational practice. The underlying impulse is to raise questions about practice and to develop insights into these problems by considering what can be learned from data about practice. According to Wayman and Cho, effective educational data use is about integration. An effective data initiative should be considered a systematic initiative directly related to teaching and learning. Without the proper technology, though, even the most capable and interested educators will find it difficult to examine data in an efficient, fruitful manner. Before use of the system, districts must be motivated to build the foundation for use of the data system. The groundwork to build the foundation includes several components. Number one, calibration. These are conversations that establish a common vision for data use. These conversations ensure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to expectations of the data use. Number two is selecting a system that fits the needs of the district. This selection will be easier to make if the vision of data use is clear from the calibration conversations. Number three are choices on how the system rollout will occur, and this is integral to the successful implementation of the data system. According to Wayman and Cho, we should introduce these steps in small, immediately useful pieces, offering the easiest and most useful functions first. Long-term system use success is the goal. In order to accomplish that success, professional development must occur throughout the process. A professional development plan should be created to assist educators with becoming proficient in using data systems in everyday practice. Another issue to consider is building a culture of collaboration around data and the use of a student data system. According to Wayman and Cho, addressing collaboration in this manner provides a scaffold for educator learning. Educators are not only learning how to use a data system, they are learning new ways of thinking about their craft and developing new professional relationships. Since data systems offer more clear and timely points for discussion than may have been previously available, the systems become a larger overall process of challenge and reform. The district must consider implementing various structures that will positively impact data system use. First, users must be able to fully and easily access the system. Other structures must also be established to encourage users to access the system. Allocating time for educators to examine data increases the likelihood of embracing a data-rich culture. Coupled with a principal exhibiting leadership qualities that include using data and data systems further supports the change process of using data during daily practice. Principals can further facilitate data use by creating a shared leadership approach, where designated faculty members assist with leading teams centered around examining data. Through this shared leadership, go-to individuals or experts are selected to offer continued support to other faculty members in the effective use of data and data systems. The use of data systems for school improvement is an ongoing transformative process. Districts should look for ways to extend the data initiative beyond initial preparation. Since the ultimate goal is to positively impact teaching and learning, data should be used to inform decisions and improve practice. When data is used in this way, the needs of the district continuously change. That change leads to the need to increase data use capacity. Engaging in those calibration conversations becomes relevant and necessary to align data use to the current visions and goals. And of course, an increase in data capacity directly correlates to a need for a larger system. Technology upgrades may be relevant at this point, so it's important that we link data to instruction, increasing data use capacity, and expanding the data to the system. Next, we will examine some developments and trends. As Copland, Knapp, and Swinnerton point out, the new era of data-driven decision-making depends on educational leaders' engagement in database problem-solving, which uses new tools and new trends to affect change for students and school systems. A variety of data analysis techniques and database strategies are now available for systematic implementation, but leaders must be skilled at setting goals and supporting staff to reach those goals. This part of the presentation will present new attitudes and approaches to leaders' use of data to make decisions. 3 lenses on data-informed leadership relate to key ideas that are particularly relevant. Number 1, efforts to define elements of data-informed leadership in context. Number 2, cultures and cycles of inquiry at the district and at the school level. And number 3, considerations of district infrastructure that inform and support school-level activity. Now we will more fully explain each one of these and review their corresponding critical components. What does data-informed leadership in context mean? Let's examine the attributes. At both the school and district level, leaders have established a clear focus for data use by staff. It begins with a focus for data-informed leadership. Leaders are in a position to define the focus for the data they might generate and use, reflecting their own leadership priorities and their response to events that call for data and evidence. State assessments play a minor but supporting role in this. More important are data from common assessments that shape teaching decisions more immediately. Next, leaders must develop coherence through a curricular theory of action. The goals and perspectives of leaders at the top of a district must permeate to the every level of the district, becoming established practice in classrooms. Coherence is created through linkages to robust professional development opportunities that are tied to curricular efforts and student support structures and programs that target key student learning needs. Last, leaders develop the data literacy of their staff to create autonomy in using data to inform action at every level. Cultures and cycles of inquiry emerge when a system of collective learning by participants ensues and staff across a district share what they are doing in their practice to improve student outcomes. Efforts to develop and sustain culture of inquiry across the system result from data-oriented leadership that is often a driving force to building an organizational culture that encourages inquiry into problems of practice. This culture leads to unleashing the power in collective teacher learning, in which teacher collaboration within schools and across districts uses synthetic problem solving to share curriculum, assessment, and instructional solutions. The role data infrastructure can play in enabling data-informed leadership to take place is significant. Access to data through technology and associated assistance makes it possible for teachers to connect to the tools and means for addressing the problems of practice that they face. Data-oriented leaders give teachers access to increasingly deeper data structures that enable teachers to gain even more clarity about the specific needs that students bring and learn from their ongoing effort to improve learning. Additionally, data-oriented leaders provide teachers with human capital resources for training and professional development, as well as material resources for improved curriculum and instructional materials to fill the achievement gaps that the data reveals. In Chapter 10 of the Handbook of Database Decision Making, Copeland and Swinnerton provide the insightful case study of Superintendent Rogers' leadership of Bodewell School District and Principal Washington's leadership of Alexander Elementary within that district. The case study serves as an example of how data-based leadership and the district and school level can have a powerful impact on teacher agency, collaboration, and morale, and student engagement and achievement. At the end of the study, Copeland and Swinnerton explain principal leadership in database school improvement is the specific and intentional efforts to link technology, curriculum and assessment, professional development, and student support in powerful ways, and the role data of various kinds play in those efforts at the school level. Now it's time to check your understanding with this brief quiz. Pause the video, take a moment to read over the questions, and then you can check your answers on the next slide. Each one is true/false. Best wishes! And here are the answers. Feel free to pause the slide so that you can check and see how well you did. These are the highlights that we think you should remember from our presentation. These next two slides contain our references. We hope that you've enjoyed our presentation on principal leadership and database decision making, and we hope that it's enhanced your readings for this week. Best wishes for the course. Thank you so much.